In the first chapter of the book, Lewis writes about his initial grief of losing his wife. He speaks of the struggle between his desire to be left alone and yet not be alone.
There is a sort of invisible blanket between the world and me, yet I want the others to be about me. I dread the moments when the house is empty.
He also records how others react to seeing him. Some talk about losing H, others do not, and still others avoid him entirely.
Whenever I meet a happily married pair, I can feel them both thinking, one or other of us must someday be as he is now.
He cannot even find the strength to read a letter or shave his face. He does not feel the need to look presentable with H gone. His great fear is that he will lose a realistic memory of her. He doesn't even have a good picture of her. Lewis's other big concern is that he will lose a proper image of God.
The real danger is of coming to believe such dreadful things about him.
Believing these dreadful things seems to slip to the back of Lewis's mind as he continues in Chapter 2. While Chapter 1 is all about the effects of H's death on his own life, in Chapter 2 he realizes how selfish his motives have been.
In this chapter, Lewis reveals the sorrow that took away H's joy. Her death cut short the joy that she had been given late in life. Therefore, Lewis resolves to remember H accurately.
The most precious gift that marriage gave me was the constant impact of something very close and intimate, yet all the time unmistakably other. Resistant, in a word, real.
Reality is striking to Lewis, as he recognizes the fact that remembering someone is not easy, even when they are alive to correct wrong perceptions. Lewis recalls meeting a friend after a long time and being reminded of what he was like after only mere seconds. H is no longer there to be that correction, and Lewis is required to cope with that.
He also sees the way others cope, the way they attempt to help him cope. They say to him, "She will live on in your memory." But death means that is exactly what won't happen. Her life is over.
You might as well think, like the old Egyptians, that she can keep the dead by embalming them.
Though we tend to scoff at the Egyptians, Lewis points out that we have a similar process. We plant gardens to honor the dead, visiting them regularly without considering the fact that the flower beds we attend to have, in our mind, become the symbol of the people for whom we grieve.
How can we possibly cope without these things? How, as a Christian, should we respond?
Talk to me about the truth of religion, and I'll listen gladly. Talk to me about the duty of religion, and I'll listen submissively. But don't talk to me about the consolation of religion, or I shall suspect you don't understand.
Lewis begins Chapter 3 by expressing the emptiness of life without H. He, of course, does not live in a constant state of thinking about her, but rather feels like there is an emptiness to everything, even though he is not consciously thinking about what it is.
Feelings, and feelings, and feelings. Let me try to think instead, from the rational point of view. What new factor has H's death introduced into the problem of the universe? What grounds has it given me for doubting all that I believe? I knew already that these things, and worse, happen daily. I would have said that I had taken them into account.
He tries to analyze this through reason. He knew what the future held when he fell in love with her. He knew that people experience loss every day around the world, but it wasn't until he experienced it himself that it hurt. He thinks that this experience was actually an eye-opener. His feelings of worldly happiness are like a house of cards that can be blown down. He questions if it is better to be blind and live blissfully than to live seeing a sad reality.
Lewis brings God into the conversation by questioning his goodness. He weighs the possibilities of God. A cruel God who enjoys causing others pain against a God who cuts like a surgeon to heal.
God did not take away Lewis's wife because God wanted to ruin him. Rather, God gave him H to enjoy for a time.
Sorrow turns out not to be a state, but a process.
In the 4th chapter, Lewis comes to this conclusion after a long journey of grief's trials. Throughout his journal entries, he is able to recall this process. However, he notes that it was not really observable at the time.
There was no sudden, striking, and emotional transition. Like the warming of a room or the coming of daylight, when you first notice them, they have already been going on for some time.
In this concluding journal, he found himself realizing just how much he had changed without even realizing it.
God cannot be used as a road. If you are approaching him not as the goal, but as a road, not as the end, but as a means, you're not really approaching him at all.
Lewis, with time, finally arrives not to a place of answers and how-tos, but rather to a place of complete surrender to God.